Carefully.
Mr. Chair.
I'm going to call Dr. David Clark.
Yeah. In speaking about transformation in respect of this bill, what is, I guess, interesting and unfortunate, in my view, is that the bill is incremental. It actually isn't about fundamentally transforming the tax system, although the bill says explicitly in its title, or uses explicitly the word transformation. And what we do need is in our tax system, and this will be agreed, I think, across the House, is that we need transparency. We need rules that are simple and straightforward so that they can be understood, so that they don't provide opportunity for abuse of the tax system. And the Transparency International organisation in their Corruption Perception Index have viewed New Zealand as being less transparent over time. We were first in the world in 2012, and now we are rated as fourth in 2015. And that drop down the international rankings in terms of corruption perception is damaging to New Zealand internationally. And so I want to commend the government on the changes, the incremental changes that are made in this bill to make the system clearer and more straightforward. So if we refer to the information provided by the Inland Revenue Department, the commentary, they refer to the communications framework, and clauses 60 through 66 of the bill clarify, we've heard some of the examples used already. The word ask is changed to apply to, and so on. And these seem trivial, and in some ways they are, but where they are clarifying things and making it more difficult for people to misinterpret them or skew them for purposes that are less than honest, that has got to be a good step forward. A good deal of the communications changes, we're told by the IRD, relate to making sure that we have a system that can cope with electronic communications, because that's the world we're living in today, where we no longer necessarily send a written statement to the IRD ending an agreement or giving notification of change and so on, but we do it by email. And that is reflected in the changes that are made in these clauses, and specifically in clause 61, there is the opportunity to notify the Commissioner as opposed to doing it in writing as the limited example of what notification might mean. And I note also in the SOP that's been discussed that there is an attempt in there, in the definition of foreign trust that is put forward, to put it forward in an electronic form. And so, I do bring that to the House's attention, because there seems to be something in concert there with what the bill is trying to achieve. It is trying to make it easier for people to comply and to provide less ambiguity in the law, because precisely when things are difficult and ambiguous is when we run into problems. I think the principles we could agree on across this House are that the tax system should be simple. It should be broad. Now, we will have different definitions of that. The government's definition of broad is certainly not one that I share. It seems that the tax system seems, from my perspective, stacked in the interest of the mega wealthy. And most New Zealanders will feel hard done by when they look at tax legislation closely. Not only because they're being forced to look at tax legislation closely, but because when they actually do that, they will see that it is often written in the interests, and particularly some of the changes this government has brought in the interests of those who are very well off indeed, and not in the interests of most New Zealanders. So I would commend the SOP of Julian Genter, because it has made an attempt to say we can make this more straightforward. We can make sure that people are able to supply information in a way that is transparent, that is straightforward, that attempts to ensure that we are not perceived as a country as having a tax system that is designed deliberately to be complex, to favour those who have wealthy and clever tax lawyers, but rather a system that is easy to comply with for all New Zealanders, one that makes sure that we are perceived internationally as a fair place, Mr. Chair,
Dr. David Clark.
as a fair place to do business. And I come back to the point I made right at the start, that concern about New Zealand slipping down the rankings in the Corruption Perception Index, because this is a very real thing. I've had opportunity, and I consider myself very fortunate to travel abroad recently, and that opportunity on the speaker's tour, and my goodness, I'm not going to talk about that at length, but what is very seriously one of the opportunities that provides is the opportunity to go and visit other parliaments and see how they do their business, and to see just what they are wrestling with in their domestic affairs. And many countries that we visit as parliamentarians, when we have the opportunity, want to know how New Zealand has attained this reputation for being a fair place to do business. It is an incredibly important part of New Zealand's story. It is what the rest of the world would like to be like. And so they are concerned, as we are concerned, when we see New Zealand's reputation dropping, when we see a perception of corruption rising in New Zealand, when that reputation that we have fought so long to attain as being a place that is transparent and fair to do business is undermined. And so I would say that any amendment to this bill, any SOP which seeks to make the tax system fairer and more transparent and easier to comply with, that makes it possible to comply with the tax system without fancy tax lawyers well versed in international tax avoidance, is a good thing. And we should be affirming it here in this House. We should be supporting changes that make our tax system fairer and avoid the perception of corruption. It's a simple point, Mr. Chair. It's a simple point. And we know that there is work going on in the OECD. The Minister, I'm sure, will regale us shortly with progress on the BEPS work, the Base Erosion Profit Shifting program that the OECD is undertaking to try and make sure that there is transparent tax treatment around the world. From my point of view, the SOP put forward that would seek to define foreign trusts and require information to be shared.
Just concentrate.
Sir, I'll come back to the point.
Concentrate on the provisions in the bill. I've already ruled out about the foreign trust, so let's concentrate on part one. Dr. David Clark.
Sir, the simple point is that anything that seeks to make the bill more simple and transparent should be viewed as a good thing. And any defensiveness on the part of the government will reflect on them. And I look forward to hearing their viewpoints on this material, because they ought to be in favour of the measures that are in the bill that do make it more modern, that make it clearer, that make it simpler. But by gum, it is not transformative. By gum, it is not transformative, and it needs to be. And I'm sure the member, David Bennett, opposite, who is a lightning rod for thinking in this sphere, will have a constructive contribution to make, that we will all want to hear about how the tax system can be made simpler, and how the perceptions that are growing of New Zealand as a more corrupt country can be challenged, that we can once again seek to be viewed as the most transparent and fair place in the world to do business. That is something that I truly believe, Mr. Chair, is worth striving for. It is New Zealand's contribution on the world stage. It's something we ought to be proud of, and those of us on this side of the House who see our ranking slipping over the years as other countries perceive us to be less transparent and more corrupt than we used to be is of concern. It's of concern to us, and I believe it should be of concern to this whole House.
I call Stuart now.